Welcome to the 2022 King's Washington Area Alumni Chapter's Career Day program. My name is John Wetterow, and I'll be the host for this program tonight. And I'm a member of the King's College class of 1970. I'm also a proud member of the King's College Washington Area Alumni Chapter Executives Committee, commonly known as KWAC, KWAC. And I'm happy to welcome each of you here tonight. We've got students, we have presenters, we've got alumni, friends, and King's staff to our second virtual KWAC Career Day program. KWAC Career Day is traditionally hosted here in Washington, D.C. by the KWAC Executive Committee. For many years, this exciting program has provided a wide range of professional opportunities to King's students, thanks to the generosity of many King's D.C. alumni and friends, many of whom are presenting and or observing in these sessions this year. If you haven't already, please be sure to mute yourself while our presenters are speaking. There will be time for questions and answers, so save your questions for that time. And when you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask it, or in the meantime, put your question into the chat program, part of this program. We've had 6 terrific sessions for our career day, and this happens to be the last one. We had 2 on Wednesday, 2 on Tuesday, 2 on Wednesday, and 2 today, and this is the last one of the program for this year. And to begin with, this session, of course, is called How Recent Federal Legislation to Rebuild Our Infrastructure and Meet the Competitive Challenge from China Will Create Millions of Good Jobs in America. Okay. To begin with, I'd like to introduce our 2 moderators for tonight. We've got Pat Mulloy from the King's College class of 1963 and Jim Ohara from the King's College class of 1958, both of who are also on the KWAC Executive Committee here in DC. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jim and Pat.
Yeah, thanks, John, for the good introduction. I want to, we're going to have the panel in 2 parts. The first part will focus on the infrastructure legislation, which was passed into law. I believe it was in late November of 2021. J.T. Ohara will be the moderator of that panel, and he has a very important guest here from the Department of Transportation, Justin Ramirez. J.T. Ohara graduated from King's 64 years ago in 1958. He then graduated from the Catholic University Law School in 1962. He then joined the Jones Day Law Firm over 50 years ago as a partner when the firm had 150 lawyers in 2 cities on 1 continent. That firm now has 2,500 lawyers in 47 cities and 5 continents. JT was head of its worldwide tax practice. He taught tax law as an adjunct professor at the Georgetown University Law School. He is the co-founder of KWAC 16 years ago. He and Ray Kane, who was the first class at King's, helped found KWAC, the King's Washington Area Club. And JT is also the older brother of Tom Ohara, Father Tom Ohara, who is a former president of King's College, and I believe is a very active member of the faculty at King's right now. So JT, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Pat. Yes, we're very fortunate to have, as Pat said, one of the top officials from the Department of Transportation, Justin Ramirez, whom I will introduce in a minute. But many of you might know that the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, is what I would say a cousin of King's. Cousins in the sense that Pete's parents have been practicing as members of the faculty at Notre Dame, and Pete himself actually taught part-time at Notre Dame, which of course is part of the Holy Cross Order. So we regard Pete as part of the Holy Cross family. As Pat mentioned, Justin is a high official in the Department of Department of Transportation. He was appointed by President Biden as the program manager of the Public Engagement Division of the Department of Transportation. We spoke to Pete's chief of staff, and she was able to arrange for Justin to make his time available to us this evening. As Pat mentioned, and as some of you might have seen on the recent 60 Minutes program, the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, is in charge of administering this bill, the infrastructure bill that was recently passed, one of the high marks so far with the Biden administration, that has created thousands of jobs. Up until now, we've been talking about jobs where people would be replacing others who are retired or are moving on to another position. But these are new jobs, over thousands of jobs in engineering, transportation, human resources, everything. Justin will cover all of that. So without further ado, Justin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, JT, and great to hear your background as well. Sounds like you've just had an amazing career. And as a fellow lawyer myself, I am in awe of what King's College has delivered. And as a graduate of a Brotherhood of the Holy Cross High School myself, I had brothers who were teachers of mine. I guess I'm a relative as well, so I'm glad to join everyone here. Again, I'll just talk a little bit about what we're doing here at the Department of Transportation during this historic time. We've heard about Infrastructure Week ad nauseum for a very, very long time. But as the president recently declared, it is now an infrastructure decade. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which we shorten and call BIL, BIL, is a once in a generation, although we hope to do it more than once, opportunity to create jobs. It is a jobs bill. It is a bipartisan attempt to really rebuild what we haven't been working on in a very, very long time, federally supported. And there are going to be so many opportunities across every inch of transportation and infrastructure. Obviously, as a Department of Transportation, we're getting the lion's share of the funding that's coming out of the multi-trillion legislation. We're very excited, and that opportunity comes with an enormous burden to make sure we do it right, and our opportunity to get across the finish line and make those opportunities happen and do it all is not missed on us. The burden that it is to make sure that we hold ourselves to a high level of responsibility. So I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities that, quite frankly, are already happening today. As our office, the Office of the Secretary, we are meeting with private and public sector partners across the country right now. And we're already hearing, without really, when it comes down to it, not a whole lot of actual dollars have hit the ground yet. But we are seeing job creation already happening based on a lot of information that we've put out. We talk about formulas, formula funding, where we tell states, and states are primary beneficiaries in a lot of these programs. We tell states what they will be allocated in the first year of this funding. This is a 5-year funding bill. And based on that, we are seeing private sector and public sector hiring up across the board. From planning to analysts to policy advisors, there are just job opportunities going up across the board, and then on top of that, we're also seeing, job numbers just came out. We're at something near a 60-year low on, people who are seeking unemployment. So it's an incredibly tight jobs market. It is a job seekers market. We're definitely seeing that because there are just so many opportunities, and it's just going to keep on most likely going that way. We're seeing definitely investment and more jobs being created in manufacturing here at home in America. And engineering jobs. I've been on many calls where, people are talking about not just shortening supply lines, by building America, but also just, the opportunity to turn around from engineering to and development into actually making things is it turns on a dime compared to when you're manufacturing things abroad. So there are just so many opportunities that bipartisan infrastructure law, with its emphasis on creating jobs here in America and buying things here in America, that's really going to happen. Speaking specifically here at the Department of Transportation, obviously, like I said, there are we're getting the lion's share of the funding. There can be and are right now a lot of job opportunities being created at the department. Specifically, we're very lucky recently that the Congress passed and the president signed our fiscal year 2022 budget. We're already deep in fiscal year 2022, but we're under a continuous resolution for a while, which kept us at long story short, kept us at lower levels of funding than what we should have been having for this year. But because of that bill being signed into law, we are able to put out more job notices. We are able to have lots more opportunities. Here at the department, we kind of have roughly 3 buckets of opportunities. The biggest bucket being career, where you go onto the federal website and you look up jobs and you fill out applications and you go through the civil service process. There are contracting jobs as well with third parties that will work here at the Department of Transportation. My specific role, I think Jim mentioned, I am a political appointee of the Biden-Harris administration here at the department, much like the secretary, although I didn't luckily have to go through the Senate confirmation in my much lower role than Secretary of Transportation. But I'm a direct hire and a political appointee here at the department. So there are lots more opportunities being opened up in all 3 of those buckets that I mentioned, thanks to that. And not just at the Department of Transportation, I was saying there's been job creation across the board in similar positions in state and local levels, who are going to be really getting the Department of Transportation doesn't necessarily, we don't build those bridges, we don't build projects, we help states and localities build them by basically funding them in large part often, and providing some expertise and helping with the planning. So we're seeing already, cities and states create positions and get ready for the influx of, depending on what year you use as a basis, 5, 6, 7 times fold more funding in certain programs than we've seen in the past. So, and that's just the public sector. Again, private sector is seeing the same kind of job growth exponentially as they get ready for a lot of our projects and programs that are going out the door. So it's an exciting time during this infrastructure decade, as I mentioned, to see so many opportunities for people to get involved in transportation, something that's been a passion of mine, much like the president and the secretary. I'm a train nerd. I love taking trains more than anything. And as a Southern California native, I'm over the moon to be living in the Northeast and being able to take trains everywhere to go visit places. And it's just fantastic, and we're going to make those opportunities even better, safer, and more equitable across the country as we make sure that, of course, that there are more opportunities for public transportation for so many here in America. So, to wrap it up with my comments, and hopefully there'll be some questions. And we're just so excited and so really blessed to be at this opportunity in time to be serving, to be serving here at the Department of Transportation. So thank you so much for having me here to talk about opportunities in transportation.
Justin, how would someone go ahead to apply for the position that the infrastructure law has created?
So definitely so many opportunities just by one, looking at the website and seeing those open positions, especially when it comes to career and civil service opportunities. There are job postings that you'll see if you scroll on. I should have it open on one of my screens. The DOT's website is transportation.gov. You get to the bottom, somewhere down there. It gets you to the main jobs website, which is kind of a catch-all for a lot of the federal jobs. So that's a great opportunity. And we'll be posting in various places, also just opportunities here on the political side as well. And for people who want know what the experience is on getting a job as a political appointee, it's really knowing people within the administration, quite honestly, is because you're us in these roles are an extension of the administration. We represent the president, the vice president, and the secretary as political appointees. So having if you don't know anyone right now who's a political appointee, feel free to reach out to me and connect. And I'm happy to be that first person that you get to know. But if you do know someone, have coffee with them, talk to them about opportunities, and they'll be able to, in my case, and for most people, we go through the presidential personnel office at the White House, and there's on the whitehouse.gov website, you'll see a link for that as well. And that's the first onboarding really place, the screening place is to get these positions is being onboarded and interviewed by the White House. So that's how I started in my process. I was interviewed by the White House and then got sent over to the Department of Transportation for my interview process from there. See, there's a question. Is there a question? Are there particular majors that offer an edge for applicants for jobs through Department of Transportation? It just depends on what you want to do in the Department of Transportation. Obviously, we have specialists who have backgrounds in specific transportation areas who study transportation or planning or engineering or safety or aerospace. Obviously, the Department of Transportation is big and diverse. So from federal highways, the FAA, to our safety team, to all what we call operating administrations. We have so federal maritime. I'm going through trying to get through all the lists in my head. If you have any of those specialties, that definitely helps. Federal Railroad Administration, Federal Transportation Administration. We have, all of those specialties that definitely helps. I came with a transportation background from my previous job in a local city government, and just my overall interest as a nerd. My legal background as a lawyer wasn't necessarily transportation focused, but as I like to tell people, the JD is one of the more flexible, backgrounds that you can have, disciplines that you can take. So it's sometimes worth the student debt that you might get into, but it opens doors. JDs are leading branches of government. They're leading corporations, colleges, everything across the board. So it just depends on your focus, and what from general policy, you could still get your way into policy, obviously, here at transportation. So definitely, it just depends. Any other questions?
If anyone has a question that wants.
Justin, I have a question. Is most of the jobs projected predominantly on the federal side, or are they pretty much on the private side?
It's really I think you're going to see private and state, and not having the numbers in front of me. I think you're going to see private and state and local jobs really are going to be the bigger buckets, just because, like I said, a lot of our funding goes out to, like, for example, federal highways is one of the bigger sources of funding that goes out to the states, and they don't just build highways. They also build infrastructure that's for biking. They do projects for multimodal kind of work. So that's one of the biggest chunks that our department will be setting out. So and that goes to the states, and the states do those projects, and the states works with private industry to help deliver those projects in large part when those projects go out to bid.
Mhm.
So but definitely, you'll see a lot of, in the private sector, you'll see a lot of private sector, people start with public sector experience, be it local. I came from a city. I worked in mayor's office, to county and states that execute a lot of these projects.
So most of the funding will go to sort of government agencies at varying levels, more so than to a private contractor who wants to do something.
Well, the private contractors will, have to build the things. But a lot of so you'll see those jobs being created more at the trained skilled level. For example, carpenters, concrete layers, those kind of skills are a lot of those jobs that will be created as well. And when it comes to numbers, those will probably be some of the highest number individuals that we'll see jobs created.
Justin, could I ask a question? One, I was glad you mentioned the importance of law degrees here in Washington, because we had a panel on graduate and law degrees last night. But coming back, my understanding is a lot of this money at the federal level is going to be pumped out through the states.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
private sector people who will build this stuff. So it's an enormous bonus and job creation at the local level for all different kinds of jobs, not just Washington jobs. These are
absolutely
in local communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is very
Absolutely.
important.
And
Very important.
we're already hearing about communities and localities, staffing up and opening job positions, getting ready to, coming from, like I said, the city, we had to hire additional individuals when American Rescue Plan passed, because it was a, once in a lifetime opportunity to get funding, to the localities, to our city, in order to help, different industries. Like we had for example, we had a restaurant rescue program, we had a small business program, a nonprofit program, and we needed individuals to help, run those through the city who's giving out the money. We had to hire people to help, make that happen. So these funding opportunities, from the federal government, basically, send the money out to and create jobs at every level.
Justin, I assume these jobs are available all the way up the pay scale, not just at the beginning level.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Absolutely. From internships all the way to, experts in the field, and people, at every level. Absolutely.
We had a student who submitted a question earlier wanting to know if these jobs will be permanent and sustainable, the ones that are being created, that might be created through this legislation.
I mean, as permanent as any one of our jobs when it comes out of it, we're all at will. But I absolutely, I mean, obviously, when you build, you see, let's just take a random bridge that is going to be rebuilt or fixed or expanded. That job will, obviously be forever, but it's creating opportunities for people. You'll see, project managers, for example, get hired on projects that, once project's done, they've now had experience delivering that project, and they will move on to their next job. But what we're seeing is that we are, we're building this legislation is really to build out our economy to create more long-term jobs, and it's jobs from the bottom up that we want to see, that these jobs, for every two concrete layers that I'm making up these statistics, but the general principle is every two concrete layers that get new jobs doing a project, we see maybe 3 or 4 restaurant workers get hired nearby because they are, now near a project that's being built, and so on. So it continues to build out different sectors of the economy. Obviously, to do those, to lay the concrete, you need the truck drivers. So we're seeing obviously more truck drivers need to be trained and hired. We're here at the Department of Transportation, we're definitely making an emphasis on hiring of women as truck drivers, and hiring of if any of you follow Secretary of Transportation, he did a ride along with a female truck driver a couple months ago in Illinois, I want to say, and it's to get to where we want in our our employment, we've got to get people who traditionally maybe not thought of as being in these roles doing them. And a part of that is saying thinking outside the box, saying absolutely women can do these jobs, and not, and also talk about equities across other communities, communities of color, and people who have otherwise been disadvantaged and haven't had the opportunities as easily as others to find these jobs and get these opportunities to work. We want to make sure that the jobs are also local. So when we're building a new bridge, that it's the community that's building it, not somebody who lives, maybe 50 miles away that's getting the job.
These jobs will not be just for blue collar workers, provide a lot of management positions too, correct?
Absolutely. Management, design, engineering, city planning, everything, all the way up and down. We're seeing that opportunities are being created, and will be, like I said, it's a 5-year spending bill, but if you want to build a new bridge that wasn't there, it's going to definitely take more than 5 years. So people will be working on some of these projects. Having just come from a city that just finished a major bridge building project that took about a decade, all the jobs at every level for long stretches of time.
Great, Beth, any more questions?
Yeah, I was just going to add that, and then of course, when a new bridge is built, obviously there's the economy, being able to bridge some communities improves. Does this bill, this infrastructure legislation and/or the Department of Transportation, does it involve broadband as well, building up of?
So that is in the infrastructure in the legislation. It's not in our bucket of funding at transportation, but there have been announcements by the White House, and I think it's Department of Commerce, that working on the broadband, and especially getting to communities that have not had. We look back at communities, might be messing up the number, 100 years ago, that didn't have access to telephone lines and didn't have access to electricity. And, we saw projects like, blessed the TVA be created, because we needed to make sure that everyone had access to these important utilities. And, necessary to survive in today's America is access to broadband and good, affordable, high-speed internet. So getting that to communities, especially, again, underserved communities, rural communities, is a top priority of this administration.
Sure, because that'll affect all kinds of education, online,
commerce, everything. Absolutely.
As far as pre-submitted questions, Jim, the rest of them that I have might wait better towards the end. So after we hear the second part of our presentation, and then you can come back to some of these. They would probably be good for Justin and possibly Veronica too. So.
Well, Justin, maybe you can sit on the bench for a moment until we have our next session, and perhaps as Beth said, after the next session, we might have some questions on both areas.
All righty, I'll be off camera for that portion, but I'll definitely be listening and be able to respond.
Good, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the next subject is going to be switching to the legislative sector. This is talking about prospective legislation, unlike the infrastructure bill that has been passed. And this area is going to be led by Pat Mulloy, who you just heard from. Pat is a graduate of King's, very well educated. Not only after King's, he went on to George Washington, where he got his legal degree as an LLB, working full-time at the State Department, going to night school at GW. Then he moved on to Notre Dame, where he had a MA degree. After he had an MA degree, he got involved in the State Department, spent some time in Canada. But since Pat is so multifaceted, he spent some time on the Hill, got involved in trade. Now he's one of the experts in US-China trade. Remember the US-China Economic Trade Commission. So we call him sometimes Mr. Commissioner, but he's an expert on all subjects. And today he's going to be talking on one of his areas of expertise, US-China trade, particularly from the legislative side. So Pat, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, JT, for that nice introduction. When JT and I were thinking about a panel that could help the students at King's know about jobs and what's going on and the type of legislation that's being created down here to create jobs and increase America's ability to compete in the global economy, we thought infrastructure and the China bill. Infrastructure is very much related to competitiveness, because if you have a lousy infrastructure, you can't compete well. So then when we thought about the China part of the presentation, we immediately thought of Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. He's a Scranton guy, grew up in Scranton, practiced law in Scranton, and had state elected positions. And now he's been elected to a US Senator. I think he's in his second or third term, I think. Yes. And he's very much involved in a major piece of legislation to deal with the competitive challenge from China. So we went immediately to the senator, and the senator has actually come to KWAC meetings before and spoken at the events here in Washington. When we went to his chief of staff and asked for someone who could really talk about the China bills that are being still worked on by the Congress, she strongly recommended a young woman named Veronica Goodman. And Veronica's with us, and let me give an introduction to her. And then I'll turn away from Veronica and give you the context in which, and then come back and she'll talk about this legislation and the key parts of it that the senator is very much involved with. Veronica is a policy advisor to the senator at his office in Washington, DC. She has been a writer and a policy expert for over 10 years. She's worked in as an economic advisor, a researcher. She earned an undergraduate degree at the George Washington University, from which I got a law degree. She then earned graduate degrees in economics and management at the Johns Hopkins University, and I believe that's also here in Washington, Veronica. She has written articles for the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, Newsweek, The Hill, the New York Times, and she is the author of 4 children's books, including the ABCs of Economics, and an E is for Economics. She is a proud immigrant who is fluent in Spanish, and she lives in Washington, DC with her husband and her 2 daughters. So Veronica, thank you for being with us. I'll try and set the stage and then bring you on to talk about the important thing that's going on. I went from King's to Notre Dame, and I studied China for the first time when I was at Notre Dame and got a master's degree, and then came to Washington in the Foreign Service. I was later in the antitrust division at the Justice Department, and I was working in Japan on an important matter. And then because I'd been in the Foreign Service, I knew guys in the embassy, and they said, "Pat, do you want to go to China?" And this was in 1981. And I said, "I want to go to China." So I went off to Shanghai, Suzhou, and Beijing in 1981. I saw a poverty-stricken country. People were no cars. People were on bicycles. They're cooking in the streets. They were poverty-stricken. And then I've been to China a number of times through the years. The last time I was there was 4 years ago. They're no longer a poverty-stricken country. And they've achieved this in 40 years to move from a poverty-stricken country to a major competitor of the United States. Now, how did they do that? And that's an important thing which we could talk about, but I won't get into that now. I did do a speech on that, which I'll send to Beth, and she can run that around campus. But the important thing is China's now a major technology power, and they want to be numero uno in the world, and they're developing high-tech technology at a very rapid pace. In the year 2015, they put out a national strategy indicating that they want to be the top in key technologies, 10 of them, by the year 2025. This got everybody's attention in the United States, and so Congress began to think about how to deal with this matter. And the Biden administration, I have to salute them. They pushed the Congress along these lines as well. Last year in June, the Senate passed the United States, it's called the United States Innovation and Competition Act. Just let me read you what this bill is about. China is focusing on research and investment on 7 frontier technologies, as it wants to compete for economic superiority over the United States. These technologies include artificial intelligence, quantum computing, semiconductors, and space exploration. Okay, the Senate passed this major bill on a bipartisan basis, I think 68 votes in June. The House hadn't acted. In February, I think it was February 4th, the House passed its bill called the America Competes Act. Let me just read what the House bill is attempting to do. The America Competes Act of 2022 includes an historic investment to surge production of American-made semiconductors. It tackles supply chain vulnerabilities to make more goods in America. It turbocharges America's scientific research and technological leadership. There's going to be a lot of money put into place like the National Science Foundation to encourage people to go into these high-tech areas of study. And it strengthens America's economic and national security at home and abroad. Now, Senator Casey is on the Senate Finance Committee, which is the chief trade committee in the Senate. He played a major role in pushing this legislation through the Senate. There was a provision he very much wanted to get into the Senate bill, and there was some opposition. But that senator, he got it in the House bill. So the question is, this is going to result in the America moving up in high technology and the ability to compete with China, which is a big thing for this country. It has to be, the House bill and the Senate bill are different. So you have to reconcile. You have to set up a process to reconcile the differences between the two bills and get one bill that passes both houses that can be signed by the president. I had thought this could get done by Memorial Day, but I think it's not going to take a little bit longer. But that's why we're so lucky to have Veronica, because she's in the middle of this whole process with Senator Casey. So Veronica, can we turn to you and tell us 3 things, I think. One, how is the bill going to be reconciled? When do you think it could be reconciled? And talk a little bit about the important provision that the senator has in that bill dealing with US investment and technology transfer to China?
Yeah, absolutely. And first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me, and the senator sends his regards. It's an honor to be able to talk. And Senator Casey, issues of labor and workers, that's always top of mind for him. So really glad to be here and discussing this with you and your community. So I will share my screen. I had put together, if I can go to one moment. There we go. Can you all see the slides?
Not yet.
Okay, one moment.
I'm not a technology guy, though.
Okay. I will switch it here.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Great. Great. So I had prepared, but Justin did an excellent job talking about the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. Just to quickly say, because we have these numbers, that we had discussed a lot, sort of the top line view of how the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law is going to create jobs. But the senator really loves to talk about the very specific impact that's going to have in Pennsylvania. So I will just say that the current estimate is that there's going to be 30,000 jobs created annually for the next 10 years in Pennsylvania. And these are good paying jobs, they're union jobs. And so I'm happy to share these slides too after the fact. And you can share them with the students just to get sort of a sense of the impact that's going to have in Pennsylvania. So as Pat sort of gave a good overview on, right now we're calling it the Bipartisan Innovation Act. That's going to hopefully be the name that comes of this conference process between Senate USICA and House Competes. So often when these kind of bicameral packages are being reconciled between the two chambers, there can be different types of conference process. They can be sort of more informal, which happens very much so at the leadership level. They can happen at the conference level. For the Bipartisan Innovation Act, we're very much expecting that this is going to be sort of a more formal conference process.
Good.
That probably means that it's going to be a little bit longer than usual, and that you'll see conferees named. We're expecting that to be, from the committees that are directly involved in that. So as Pat said, Senate Finance is going to be heavily involved. They are the ones that handle trade in the Senate. And so, a big part of Senate USICA and House Competes is the trade title. Those differ pretty significantly between the House and Senate versions. So there's going to have to be some negotiating between the two to figure that out. The trade title includes a number of very important provisions for Senator Casey. Beyond our legislation, there's trade adjustment assistance. There's changes to our anti-dumping and countervailing duties laws. So it's a very comprehensive approach to trying to modernize our trade policy. And, I would say that a lot of folks see this as an opportunity that doesn't come up very often. So everybody's very motivated to make it work. Because this is a very fluid process, it's hard to say what the employment projections will be. But as Pat so well put it, we're losing out to China in terms of our competitiveness. And so a lot of these investments are going to be critical to basically shaping our workforce going forward. I will share some data that I pulled up, which is that Data for Progress estimates that, this is just based on Senate USICA, so it would be different for whatever the final is, but that the appropriations provisions would contribute between 44 and 51 billion annually to US GDP from 2022 through 2027. And it would create or preserve a total of between 2.6 million to 3 million jobs over the same period. So that's a huge amount of jobs. Obviously, it would have an immense impact, and so very important. Also important to point out that their estimates find that a majority of the jobs created would be concentrated in industries directly or indirectly related to the innovation economy. So this is sort of where we get to the competitiveness part. So these are going to be sort of, in engineering, scientific, professional, technical services. But as Justin pointed out about the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that there are spillover effects whenever these jobs and industries are invested in. And so you're going to see indirect ecosystem effects on job creation in these communities. As we've seen when, big manufacturing investments are made in communities, that creates a need for restaurants and retail, the janitorial services that would be in the building, manning these facilities. So it's, just really wonderful to see in terms of job creation. One thing we do here quite a bit about is that it's great, and this is across both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and what would be the Bipartisan Innovation Act, is that it's not just good enough to create these jobs, but that often there are concerns over talent and workers that have the matching training and skills to fill the positions. And this is something we're seeing in infrastructure when we talk to a lot of labor in Pennsylvania. And so I think both, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Bipartisan Innovation Act make investments in workforce to be able to scale up our workers that are in these industries and make sure that the positions will be able to be filled. And so that, speaks to some of the interests that you may have in what you're studying and how they match up with sort of where these forward-looking jobs will be. Speaking about, sort of the pieces that Senator Casey is working on in the Bipartisan Innovation Act, there's two that I wanted to share with you that are directly related to trade. However, one of them is probably the one that's most visible at the moment, and that's the National Critical Capabilities Defense Act. I am a policy advisor for Senator Bob Casey, and I lead both his labor and trade portfolio. So a lot of these issues are sort of at the nexus of what's in my portfolio. This is bipartisan, bicameral legislation on both the Senate and House sides. So we're leading it with Senator John Cornyn out of Texas. And then there's both Democrats and Republicans on the House side that, were the ones that sponsored it and House competes. What the NCCDA does is that it establishes the National Critical Capabilities Committee to conduct ongoing reviews of supply chain security, domestic production, and manufacturing capacities of identified national critical capabilities. Important to note that this proposal would establish an outbound investment review mechanism that would cover proposed offshoring of US production development, manufacturing, fabrication of identified critical national capabilities for foreign adversaries. So we're really looking at countries like China and Russia. And I think, for the senator, this really became, a conversation of having an outbound review mechanism has been happening for many years now. But every day that passes, through the pandemic, through the invasion of Ukraine, we're realizing that there are, serious vulnerabilities in our supply chains, and that we need more visibility and transparency into where those are, so that we can, for national security reasons, for economic reasons, we can make sure we understand those. So that's the first one. And so we're just working with our counterparts every day in the House and Senate to try to make sure that folks understand the importance behind this legislation and why it's important in whatever the ultimate Bipartisan Innovation Act is. The second piece that I wanted to talk about, which is important to Senator Casey, is the Women's Economic Empowerment and Trade Act. He is leading this with Senator Cortez Masto, which is legislation to strengthen and update the generalized system of preferences, which are standards on workers' rights, and ensure that countries that are receiving these trade preferences and benefits are doing so with equal rights and protection under the law, regardless of gender, for workers and women. And so, that's sort of the second piece that we're looking at. That one, as opposed to the NCCDA, is in Senate USICA. So we've kind of got one in each package and trying to track both and make sure that they get included into what ultimately makes it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Pat, you're muted. I don't know if you wanted to come back in with anything. Let me see if I can get you unmuted there. So we have a couple, now would be a good time if we want to take some questions while Pat's getting, I think he's trying to looks like he just switched computers. If anyone has any questions, you can, there's a little button to raise your hand, or you can put something in the chat. And we could take questions now. I have a few that were submitted beforehand. Maybe that'll get us started. So one of the questions that students submitted to us, do you think that by helping the growth of high-tech industries, it'll decrease the amount of careers that are available in warehouses where technology might be replacing it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that we've heard. I would say the two are not necessarily related. I think that in some ways the pandemic has already accelerated some of the technological changes that are happening, but I would sort of see them as different sectors of the economy. I think we, for competitive reasons, need to focus on sort of what's included in Bipartisan Innovation Act, and I think that that'll sort of create spillover effects across the whole economy.
If I could jump in, my computer went off. I tried to come home with my wife's computer, but I'm back on now. This important provision that the senator has in called the National Critical Capabilities Defense Act, which you talked about. When I was on the banking committee staff, we did the 88 trade bill and we created CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. That is a committee that would be able to stop a foreign government from buying a key technology in this country, gave the president that authority if it was a threat to our national security. So if the Chinese were coming over and buying some important technology, the president has the authority to stop it. When I was on the China Commission, what I saw was the Chinese incentivized our companies to outsource production by helping them make more profits in China, and they did it. So what we found out during the pandemic and recently is that we can't make things in this country that are important to our national security. And so the companies have offshored stuff that we really need here. And I understand, isn't your bill in that you're really trying to get some of that stuff back into the United States by reviewing what some of these companies are doing at the insistence of the Chinese government?
Yes, absolutely. And so there's, we're using sort of a multi-prong approach, I think, across the whole package, right? There's the investments that are happening, which are subsidies to, get companies to invest in the US and in our communities and developing these manufacturing capabilities. But we also want to say if things are going to be offshored, we need to absolutely be able to have visibility and decision-making into how that's going to affect our national security and economic interests. In the legislation, the president, after multiple rounds of reviews from this committee, would be able to block any kind of transaction that would move or activity that would move jobs or capabilities overseas. We intend for that to be used seldomly. I think that's the part that is sort of most concerning to people, but it is there in case of an emergency.
And the bill is a bipartisan one. Senator Cornyn is a major player, and he's a key Republican leader in the Senate, right?
Absolutely, yes. So Senator Cornyn is our co-sponsor. He's our partner in the effort. We are in communication with his office pretty much daily. And he is also very much so a proponent of the CHIPS funding that is in the package, which increases our semiconductor investments in the US. And so I think, I can't speak for their office, but I would just say that the concern is in part that you would make these huge investments in the US and, you don't want companies to then turn around and move those overseas in 5 to 10 years.
Exactly. Thank you. One more thing, semiconductors are so important because we've had an ability to make some cars in this country to slow down because they don't have enough semiconductors. And we have to import these semiconductors. So we have to have the ability to make these things in the United States. And this China legislation will take a big step toward recreating that capability in the United States of America. Isn't that right, Veronica?
It is, and I think as we've seen in the pandemic, the prices for semiconductors and the availability have been very problematic. And I think it's important for folks to understand that the United States used to have a lot more semiconductor production here in the United States. And so it really became, it just in the past like decade or so that a lot of those jobs were outsourced. And so when we talk about needing to onshore that capability again, it's it's historically been here. So we're hoping that also makes it through.
One more comment I'll make on that. I was delighted when the president in the State of the Union address, there was a CEO of Intel was in the audience, and he saluted Intel for putting this major new semiconductor manufacturing plant in the state of Ohio. I know Senator Sherrod Brown was very pleased with that. He's the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and I think he's a major player with Senator Casey in pushing this legislation through the Congress.
He is, yes. The Senator Sherrod Brown is also working a lot on their efforts. They have a piece of legislation in the trade title that's called Leveling the Playing Field, and it has to do with the anti-dumping countervailing duties law that I had previewed. But I will say that this is an issue that cuts across a lot of states where jobs and manufacturing were outsourced overseas. And so we're trying to build up those great jobs in the US again, and make sure they're available to young people that are graduating or looking to the future in terms of the kind of careers that they want to focus on.
Thank you, Veronica. Any other questions?
Yeah, so just a reminder for anyone on, if you have a question, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. I'll be sure to see it. Or, there's a little raise your hand feature. I'll look out for those too. One of the questions that came up is just how the war in Ukraine, is it affecting this bill at all? Meaning like I know the attention might have drifted from it. So I just thought that might be interesting to think about.
A little bit. A lot of, each office on the Hill creates the portfolios differently. So it's based on their responsibilities. There's a lot of people who work on trade who also do foreign relations. And so to that extent, they've been asked to do more with the same number of hours in the day. But that's just part of the job and part of what we're used to. I think for a few weeks, as people were adjusting and trying to figure out what the right approach would be to strengthen, Ukraine and our allies in the region, it was that. But I think now in these next few weeks, people are really focusing, and a lot of offices are involved in the conference process, getting it stood up. Seeing, what is in each of the packages, what can easily be reconciled, and then there's some pieces that are stickier, and so we're focusing on those.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Not.
Jared, do you have a question?
Fire is in the second slot. It's not rock, so it can't be that
Jared?
big. It's smaller.
Jared? I'm not sure if he had a question or if he just unmuted himself. So we'll see if he has a question, he can come back in. One of the questions that was asked earlier was, is the recent concerns with inflation going to affect American businesses and any of the legislation that we've been talking about? That was submitted by a student.
I'm not sure if Justin has thoughts on that from the infrastructure law perspective. From the Bipartisan Innovation Act, that's not really a consideration in terms of the way that it's structured or like what it would impact. When you're thinking about, inflation is a very important issue. It's affecting a lot of household wallets and how people are able to afford things like food and rent. Et cetera. But in terms of a lot of these packages, usually the way they're structured over a 10-year period, it doesn't affect inflation in the short term as we would think about it.
Thank you. And Veronica, just to add on that, if everyone can still hear me, I'll just say that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law does have a significant amount of funding that will shore up our supply chains, which have been putting pressure on prices across the board. So by improving our supply chain, making sure that we improve that part of the economy will long-term keep inflation down. And that is the goal of this administration, to address those concerns that families are having across the country. Little things, not so little things like making sure we have we've got 500 billion going to charging stations across the country for electric vehicles, because as we see gas prices rising by the day, putting people in electric vehicles brings down the cost for families across America. So we're definitely trying to make those right investments that will bring down inflation.
Justin, if I could just jump in for one more thing I see going on. The president and this administration, we have these Buy America laws for government procurement. In other words, when a government spends taxpayer money to buy goods and services, the law up until now has been saying 50% of the money has to be spent in America, but a big portion of it could be spent outside. The Chinese could get government money to create jobs in China. The administration is moving to get these, and that weakens your supply chains. As you see the big, all the ships coming into California sitting there in the ocean because their supply chains there can't get the goods there. So if you make those goods at home, your supply chains are much more secure. And that's what the Buy America provisions in the government procurement are trying to get, I think, Veronica. Am I not right?
Just to echo that, absolutely. In executive orders from the president and rulemaking within the Department of Transportation, Buy America is at its forefront. And we hear from industry and private corporations that they hear us when we say Buy America.
Yep.
Okay, do we have any more questions, Beth, at all?
I think most of it that were asked prior have been covered. And there's just wondering about if employment laws might change human resources, but I'm not sure if that is how these bills might affect that or not. So I'm not sure I understood the question quite, but that I think everything that was asked prior was covered. And if not, if students have a question, speak now or.
Yes, last opportunity. Anybody else have any other questions that they want to ask at this particular time? Just stop and click in and start asking. Okay.
I'll make one more comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I've traveled a lot. I've traveled a lot in Asia when I was on that China Commission, then when I was an assistant secretary for trade under President Clinton. I remember flying from Korea in a beautiful airport and flying from Korea into JFK Airport in New York. Honest to God, I felt like I was flying from a first world country into a third world country because we haven't kept our infrastructure good in this country. This infrastructure bill and this China bill are going to be enormously important to the future of this country. And so that people and our young people can have jobs and careers in this country that produce wealth and that they can raise families and have good communities. So I can't thank the senator and the administration and bipartisan, both parties, for moving to get this kind of legislation done. The infrastructure bill is already done, and the China bill is very important to get done.
Okay, well, thanks, Pat. All right, I want to thank, on behalf of the KWAC committee, I want to thank two of our executive committee members, Pat Mulloy and Jim Ohara, for their extensive work, and also for Veronica Goodman and Justin Ramirez for their input. I thought everybody was excellent. The input was great, and I think it kept the the group around and everybody was listening. It's just too bad we didn't get any more questions. So with that, this is the last of our Career Day programs for this year. And I want to thank the staff from King's for their support for us in doing this virtually. And hopefully maybe next year we'll be bringing everybody down to DC.
I want to thank Veronica and Justin for jumping in here and helping us so much. It means a lot to us, and we really appreciate it.
Definitely.
Here, here.
Yeah, it
Definitely.
really does mean a lot.
Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you all. And, if you are interested in the Hill, please share my email. I'm happy to talk and to talk about that experience as well.
Same
Thank you
here.
all so
Please feel
very
free to
much.
share my email.
Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Veronica,
everybody.
Justin, Pat, Jim, John, everybody.
Thank you.
Great job. Great
Okay.
job. Beth,
Thank you.
Rose.
Okay.
Much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.